Sometimes the smallest voice can shake the largest walls of cruelty. Rain had been falling for hours, drumming a steady rhythm against the roof of Miller's diner. Outside, the streetlights glowed hazily through the wet haze, creating golden halos that danced on the slick pavement. Inside, the diner smelled of fried onions, fresh bread, and rich, bitter coffee, a smell that wrapped around every visitor like a warm, reluctant hug. For Lena Parker, the diner was more than a place to work. It was her battlefield, her lifeline, and sometimes the only quiet moment she had in a day that refused to slow down. At 23, Lena had learned to carry burdens most adults never had to bear. A sick father, a younger brother dependent on her, and bills stacked like silent accusations. Yet she moved through the diner with practiced grace, balancing plates and refilling coffee cups. Always smiling, always polite, always silent about her exhaustion. Most customers only saw a waitress. Few noticed the resilience behind her tired eyes, the way her shoulders carried invisible weight, or the way she hid the tremble in her hands. But that evening, one person would notice. The bell above the door rang sharply. Heads turned instinctively. He entered. He was tall, with polished boots that clicked sharply against the tiles. His uniform was crisp, a badge gleaming on his chest. Authority radiated from him like heat, and the room seemed to bend slightly in deference. Conversations hushed. Even the regulars paused mid-bite. Lena approached with menus and glasses of water, as she did hundreds of times before. As she passed the officer's booth, a boot extended, not by accident, not out of clumsiness, but deliberately. Her tray tipped. Plates crashed. Coffee splattered across the floor. The diner went silent. Then came laughter. Cruel, sharp, and calculated. "Watch where you're going," the officer said loudly, smirking as Lena knelt to clean the mess. Her cheeks burned with humiliation. Her hands shook as she muttered, "I'm so sorry." Words she didn't owe. No one moved. Silence has a way of teaching people to stay small. Fear is contagious. Except at the back corner, an elderly man sat alone. His soup untouched. His coat was worn, posture relaxed, and his eyes, sharp and observant, missed nothing. He had seen the boot. He had heard the laughter. He had felt Lena's dignity being crushed under the weight of silence. He stood, slowly, firmly. The officer noticed him and smirked. "Got a problem, old man?" The stranger ignored the provocation. Kneeling beside Lena, he asked softly, "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, tears threatening to spill. He helped her stand, brushing off the coffee stain on her apron. Then he turned to the officer. "I believe you owe her an apology," he said calmly. The room stiffened. "You accusing me?" the officer barked, towering over him. "I am stating what I saw," the old man replied, voice steady as stone. The officer leaned closer, voice low and threatening. "You should sit down before you regret it." The old man smiled gently. "I've stood my whole life when it mattered." A pause. The diner owner stepped forward. Someone else reached for a phone. The authority the officer relied upon was crumbling. The walls of silence around him were cracking. He muttered a forced apology and left. The bell jingled as the door shut behind him. Lena exhaled a long, shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Thank you," she whispered. The old man nodded. "Never forget, you deserve dignity." He left, never to return. But the ripples of his quiet courage lingered. The days that followed were different. Lena noticed small changes. Customers held doors, smiled longer, left generous tips without reason. The staff seemed lighter somehow, as if they had been reminded that strength isn't loud, and kindness isn't transactional. Weeks later, Lena found a note slipped under her apron at the diner. Bravery isn't always fighting. Sometimes it's standing still. Don't let anyone make you forget your worth. No signature. She smiled, tears welling again, not from pain this time, but relief. A month passed, and one rainy evening brought another challenge. A young boy, drenched and shivering, stumbled into the diner. His clothes were soaked, his small hands trembling as he held onto a tattered backpack. "Hey," Lena greeted softly. "Are you okay?" He shook his head, glancing around nervously. The diner was busy. Many glanced at him, then looked away. Fear, judgment, and disinterest crowded the air. But Lena remembered. She remembered the old man, remembered the way courage was gentle, yet undeniable. She approached him with a towel and warm tea. "Sit here. You're safe," she said. The boy's eyes widened. "Really?" "Yes, really," Lena said, smiling. "No one here will hurt you." As he sipped the tea, another diner stepped forward. A woman offered him a sandwich. A young man gave him his coat. Quiet acts multiplied into a wave of kindness. The boy smiled for the first time in days. It was the same lesson Lena had learned from the old man. Courage and kindness are contagious, and sometimes one person's quiet strength can awaken a whole room. Months later, the officer returned. Lena's heart sank for a moment, but she was no longer the same girl who knelt silently under his laughter. He approached a table near the back, looking for confrontation. But the diner had changed. Customers no longer turned away. They watched. Staff no longer hesitated. They stood tall. The officer smirked, but the room held its breath. Lena walked past him confidently, holding a tray of coffee. "You need something?" she asked, her voice calm, almost icy. He faltered. No laughter came, no words. The weight of truth was heavier than any badge. He left again. No apology this time. But he didn't need to. The lesson had been imprinted, quietly and indelibly, in everyone's hearts. Years later, Lena inherited the diner after Mr. Miller retired. She kept it small, warm, and safe, and she placed a small plaque above the counter. Kindness is louder than cruelty. Courage is quieter than fear. Regulars, new faces, and passers-by all noticed. Some smiled, some paused, some left inspired. One rainy evening, Lena watched a young waitress trip, plates clattering to the floor. Patrons gasped, but she didn't panic. She saw a young man at the back, silent and calm, standing slowly, and for a moment, she recognized herself. The world had a way of breaking people, but it also had a way of giving them back courage. Because courage, real courage, doesn't shout. It whispers. And sometimes, that whisper can echo louder than the loudest cruelty.